Welcome to Nico's storytelling show. Thanks for taking the time to walk me and my audience through your story. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, the reason why I invited you to this podcast is because you have an also unique view on storytelling and on building a campaign and building some kind of a journey for your audience and for your client, being an owner of video production agents. You work with a lot of big Australian names, and the fact that you've started early on and you've decided to build your company independently is just another perspective of what we can learn from the hero's journey and you being the hero in this case. So first of all, how are you feeling? How is the day?
How's the day?
As of today, yes,
Oh,
how are
yes,
you?
yes. Yeah, doing very well, thank you. It's a lovely morning here in Melbourne. We've had some good weather the last few days, nice and warm, 40 degrees on the weekend. So, very warm, very nice. Thank you. And yourself?
Doing pretty well, and winter and a little bit cold here. We're still defrosting after the holidays, but expecting spring anytime soon.
Lovely, fantastic.
Now, one of the main things that stood out to me, first of all, you had one kind of a plan initially when you were a teenager, when you were growing and developing yourself. Your initial goal, as you mentioned in our conversation, was to become the best goalkeeper ever possible. And you were very dedicated to becoming this person, meaning like non-stop practices, but not only the physical aspect of it, but also the technical aspect of it, analyzing, as you mentioned, the best goalkeepers. This I can mention is the early beginning, the initial stage of your hero's journey. But tell me and the audience what exactly inspired you, and how was this dream born to be a goalkeeper?
Yeah, thank you. So, when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I was in my last years of primary school, and we had in year six, as 12-year-old, we had a school sport, and I had done previous years cricket and a few other sports, and I thought, you know what, I want to give football a go, soccer, football, and I hadn't played before. None of my friends had played that sport, and I thought I just want to give it a go. So I went out to the trial day and tried running around on the field a little bit, and I enjoyed it. It was good fun. And then the coach that was there at the time, he said, "So we need someone to be the goalkeeper." And myself, along with a couple others, put our hands up and we said, "Hey, we'll give it a crack." Only little 12-year-old little tackers. So I put my hand up for that, and I kind of just loved it. It came naturally to me, the diving around, the catching of the balls. And so for that 3 4 month period where we had competitions representing the school, that was my role. And I remember going around to all those matches, and my dad would come to the matches and watch me. He'd stand behind the goal and say, this stuff. And he played when he was a kid, at a somewhat decent level in Australia. And he always said to me, Didier, the number one thing that you have to do as a goalkeeper is be able to talk. You have to communicate with your defenders. You have to communicate with your midfielders, where you want them to be.
Okay.
At a corner, you need to tell people where they need to be all the time. You've got to chat all the time. And so that became part of my game. And as I progressed from that that year level at school, I didn't play competitively outside of school. And then 2 years later, as a 14-year-old, I had new friends. I'd moved to high school and I had new friends group, and they all played football. And I said, all right, I'm going to go play with them. So as we went into 14-year-olds, year 8, year 9, year 10, I started playing competitively outside of school with them and took on that role as a goalkeeper still, and progressed from there. That was the start of the goal, the start of the dream.
Okay. That is very interesting that you mentioned about the communication. Now, I'm not a football fan. I've always been very, very. No, it's not. It doesn't come naturally to me. And telling me that the goalkeeper usually has to communicate with the defenders and the people in front of you. Now that you mention it, it makes sense. But how do you what was the initial thought on that early stage? Because a lot of people they realize that communication is important when they start their career path. 18, 19, 20 years old, usually in school or high school, communication is not that important as an aspect. Did you have anybody to learn from about what to communicate and how to communicate it? And what stands out from this experience?
Yeah, in those early years, not really people to learn off as so much. Definitely in the latter years, as I got more experienced coaches behind me, as I learnt about the game more, as I analysed the game more, definitely at that point I began to get inspired, I suppose you can call it, from the really top goalkeepers and the top coaches around as to how I should communicate. But at those early years, it was very much about finding my feet in that area and having the confidence to be able to direct the defenders or the midfielders and say, you need to be here right now because this is going to happen if you're not, or if there's a corner
Mm.
coming in, you have to stand here, you do this, you do that. And so in those early years, very much so finding the confidence, finding the feet to be able to do that. And then in terms of actually directing it and the type of communication,
Yeah.
you have to be a mix of autocratic as well as a little bit towards a laissez-faire perspective, if you want to bring it into that business perspective. Autocratic being, do the now, you have to do this. I'm not going to give you a reason why, just do it. And laissez-faire being, okay, here's a bit of a guideline for you, but for the most part, you can do your own thing, and then I'll come in to tell you what you need to do when you need to do it, if that makes a little bit of sense.
Definitely, but that's the curious thing about it because, as you mentioned, you need to figure out what to say and in what manner to say it because not everybody responds to your directions in the same way. You might be more dominant towards somebody, and that brings confidence, and therefore they will listen to you. But it might backfire with somebody else, especially if you're working with, for example, the captain of the team, or you also, I believe, you need to coordinate all of this discussion with the coach as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah,
Yeah,
how do you coordinate this?
yeah. So for a lot of players around that younger age, they're not currently as the youngsters, they're not used to being in that communication area. When you get to the top levels, everyone's talking. Not just the goalkeeper, everyone on the field is yelling at everyone.
Mm.
And so when I was playing, I was 15, and I was playing competitively at this time, and I was playing for the under 18. So I was playing with players 4 years above me. And I remember there was one game in particular. We were playing very, very well. We were dominant. We were winning 7-8-0. So comfortable game for us. And I was
Yeah.
still out there, you know, telling, do this, do that, do that. And one of the centre backs, one of the defenders, he just turned around and told me to shut up. And, and it was a good moment for me because now that I think back on it, I should have just read the moment. We're up 8-0. It's comfortable. There's no need to be a little bit directive. Whereas if it's a more
Yeah.
of a tighter game and anything could happen at any time, that's when you do need to step in. You need to be that leader, and you need to say, okay, this needs to happen. So it's very much about finding that balance of when do you need to put a step forward, when do you need to open your mouth and say something, versus you can take a step back and just let it happen because everyone in the team is doing as they should. And that not just relates to, of course, sport and in this case football, but that
Yeah.
relates to business as well. If your team is doing fine as they are, then you don't need to step in and tell them what to do things. But likewise, if there's a little bit of a game on and a little bit of a match where things could go either way, that's when you need to be in that leadership role. And you need to say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is why, and take it that direction.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like picking when to micromanage your team and when to leave them be.
Definitely agreed.
Nice. I want to move on now more because obviously you have a lot of experience. And if we have set up the initial stage of your hero journey, like building towards this dream of being the best goalkeeper. Now, in our conversation, you mentioned that, as usually in the hero journey, the second part is the obstacle, the problem that you need to face. You mentioned in 2020, there because of COVID and just the situation, and additionally an injury that turned out very, very bad eventually, you've changed your focus. You also mentioned when you were 16 years old, you had a mentor that was introduced to your life and he had a huge influence on your decisions moving forward. So, how exactly did the transition happen from soccer, from football to actually running your own business and video production?
Yeah. So to give full context to the situation and to the story, 16, 17, playing football still, and then COVID came through in 2020. So I would have been 17 at that time, 2020.
Okay.
And because of COVID, as across the world it all happened, everything just stops. So we couldn't play, we couldn't go train. We had very strict laws here in Australia, particularly in Melbourne,
Yeah.
where I am, where we couldn't go more than 5 kilometers away from our house. We could only go and see one other person for 1 hour a day outside of our family. So very, very restricted as to what our movements could be. And so I said to myself, "Well, I'm not going to stop training, even though there's no games to play each week. I'll just keep improving myself and improve my fitness and what forth." So I was training 6 days a week. I was doing double sessions most days, and over time, because it was such a heavy training load, and there was no reduction in training because there was no games to reduce for, I overworked myself. And
Mm.
what happened was I got injured. It would have been around about October, November of 2020, I got injured. And in the end, the injury wasn't that bad of an injury. It was a pretty manageable injury, but it got misdiagnosed 3 times. So the injury rehab plan that I was provided the first time made it worse. So I go to the next doctor, they give me another plan that makes it worse, etc. So that dragged on for 6 or 7 months into 2021. And by that stage, I hadn't been training for a period of time. I hadn't been in the gym. I hadn't been running. So lost my fitness, lost my strength, lost a little bit of technical ability, and as a result, lost the motivation to pursue that goal. And as a 16-year-old, I went and got my first job, and it was at a pizza shop. And the boss that I had there, Michael, he's grown to be a fantastic mentor for me. But over those latter years, 17, 18, 19, as I was under his leadership, he noticed that I started to have a little bit of a hobby for the cameras, filming.
Mm.
And that came up as a result of, again, through the soccer, through the football. I was filming my games. I was filming family holidays. I was filming family gatherings, whatever it may be, and then creating little videos out of it. And so, as I'm sitting in no man's land, I guess you can call it, I don't have any goal anymore. I'm just at school doing my thing. What do I want to do with my life after school? I don't know.
Yeah.
And as an 18-year-old, at about June, July, we have to submit in Australia applications for university to say it is my intention to go to university. I would like to study this course if I get the required grades at school. And I was looking at this piece of paper and I'm thinking to myself, do I really, really want to go down this pathway? I don't know. And I had an interest for sports science based on all the work I had done with sport previously. And I thought that could be an avenue. And then there was this little thought in the back of my head about business. Do I want to start a business? So then I was looking at business courses at university. I was looking at sport business coaches to have a bit of a hybrid mix of both. But I was still looking at this piece of paper for months on end, so thinking, do I want to put this in and actually put the application in? Because you have to pay for that as well. You have to put a fee for it.
Yeah.
And so I sat on it for a little bit, had a thought about it, and Michael knew I would have chats with him about where I wanted to go and what forth. And him being in the film industry as well, so he was working full time for what it's worth in the pizza shop, and then outside of that, he was doing his own filming for weddings and for real estate and things like that. And then for one day, whatever the reason was, I can't pinpoint the exact reason when I look back on it. Something in my head just clicked one day, and I woke up and I said, I want to create my own business in video. Yeah, Nico, I don't know. I don't know. It popped out. I
It
never
just click.
used. I never had used a professional camera before. All I had was a little baby camcorder that I brought for $150 to film my soccer games, and I said, I'm going to do this. And so I said to Michael, that's what I want to do. And then by the end of 2021, I'd finished my schooling years. Michael was upgrading his camera gear, and he said, Didier, do you want to purchase my gear secondhand? And I said yes. So I put down that money, and that was my first professional camera, and that was the gateway into the world of video.
Um, you, a lot of it sounds like it's a good feeling, and you decide to trust your gut feeling and go with it. You mentioned also that the first videos that you've recorded are of yourself playing and also some family events during holidays, etc. Do you remember, besides recording them, then sitting down on the computer and compiling those videos? So was there some passion in editing and creating those movies?
Definitely there was. One that I very much remember was in year 9, so I would have been 15, 16, and we had to do a video for
Mm.
our English class, and we had to tell a story about something that had changed over time, over historical time. And my love for football, my friends' love for football, we did a story about the start of English football and the creation of the Premier League and stuff like that. And I remember being so engrossed in the editing of that film. It only lasted for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but I was so engrossed in editing it and putting it all together. And then when the teacher saw it and she loved it, it was such a nice feeling inside to know that I'd produced something on behalf of all of my friends as well, that were part of it, that was liked. And I think that feeling must have just sat with me without coming out consciously for years until that point, and then it all came together. Maybe I'm not sure.
Pulling thread from here, pulling the thread from there, and actually pulling all of those threads into something that you can package, product, and sell eventually.
Definitely.
Before I move on to the part of how exactly you approach your video and how exactly you approach your work with the clients, you mentioned your mentor Michael, and that he had some kind of influence, a lot of influence it sounds to you. Could you pinpoint some specific lessons that you have learned from either observing his work or just in your conversations?
Specifics, I think, very difficult to pinpoint because
Okay.
it's such a broad mentorship, broad relationship. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is just things that I had picked up from him over the years, whether that be working within the team environment at the pizza shop, how about he manages people. Again, we talked about leadership earlier on, taking that step
Yep.
back when things are okay and not having to to micromanage or control certain aspects. I think he does a very good job of that. Or when at the time, when he was involved in that, he did a fantastic job. But then beyond that, going into the film industry and into the video world, just being able to learn some of the lessons that would take maybe 5 years to learn those in a matter of months or weeks from him, just from learning from his experiences. And one of the greatest lessons that I learned from him in 2022, February 2022. No, February 2023, sorry. There was a film camp up in Sydney, a 1 week film camp. So you go there, it's some of the best videographers, video people from across Australia. And you learn from them, you have small groups and what forth. And he'd gone the year before in 2022, and he said to me, Didier, you have to go to this if you want to meet people in video and what forth. And I'm looking at the ticket price. It was around about 4,000, 5,000 Australian dollars. And I think I don't have the money to spend on this. And the tickets were closing on, let's just say, February 1st. And it was coming up to that date very quickly. And he said, you have to go, you have to go. And I'm very wary. And I said, bugger it, I'll do it. And I did that. And that has been one of the best decisions that I've ever made, because I met a guy there called Ben. He lives in Sydney. And since then, we've done some amazing things. We've gone over to New Zealand to go and film together. He's worked within the business for myself on a few different projects. And I would class his relationship between the two of us as one of the closest that I have in both a personal capacity and a professional capacity. So the learning there from Michael is, if you have a great opportunity to learn from people and meet people, find a way to do it. And I'm glad that he really pushed me into doing that, because not just the relationship with Ben that I've got out of that, but everything else I've got out of that event for that period of time has been phenomenal.
I can definitely agree on this part, that having somebody to work with and to learn from, especially when you're starting your career and starting on your path, is one of the most important things, because it just shortens the way and shortens the time you need to absorb the information, to learn from those experiences. And that's why I'm heavy on this topic here, asking about your mentors and what you have learned from them and how you can scale your experiences through them. And besides emphasizing on this, you also mentioned leadership. Now, one of the things I love about people who are great at sports and then take those skills and transfer them into business, because they are so applicable. You mentioned communication, you mentioned leadership. Uh, do you have something specific that you still use from your goalkeeping, routines and workouts that you applied in your business now?
I was having this conversation with a friend the other day as well about the crossover
Nice.
between sport and business. And as you touched on there, it's incredibly applicable in both worlds. And from one perspective, I'm very surprised that there's not more sports people that finish their career in sport and move into business, because there are so many similarities. And for me, those similarities are the character traits that you pick up along the way. If you're going to be competing at any decent level in sport, whether that be the Olympics or the top of your game anywhere, or even just aspiring to be at the top of your game anywhere, you have to be disciplined. You have to work hard. You have to put in the effort to do what you need to do. You have to be looking to improve everything across the board. But more importantly, those
Yeah.
one percenters that they're only 1%, but that 1% can tenfold an area, a certain specific area of expertise. And so, in terms of the goalkeeping position, or in terms of the sport of football, there may not be a lot of transformation across to the world of business from that. But picking up those traits along the way, running your own business and starting your own business, you have to be disciplined. You have to be focused on doing just that and nothing else. You have to put the hard work in to do the long hours day after week after month
Yeah.
to build that up. And then once you get to the point where you want to be to, then go even further beyond that. So I think that has very much put me in good stead and put me in a good position from looking back at those years learning that I have to do that to be well in my sport, and then bringing that across to business and saying, well, I've already got these character traits as an individual. Now let's just apply them to a different area.
Fair enough, and just wanted to recap what you said. Taking the discipline from the sport, taking the fact that you need to improve in many areas, and also if you are a very good goalkeeper, or if you're very good at doing dunks, or you're a very good defender, focus on this area and become the top 1%, the top 0.01%, and improve daily on your strengths. These are also the skills that you can apply in your business, correct?
100%. Yeah, it definitely just that focus is so important because you always get things pop up all the time. Yeah, you think of the Matrix with the red girl. You know, there's always a red girl
Yeah.
somewhere that you want to look at, but you have to be focused and say, no, I'm not looking at that. I'm just dialed in, and this is what I'm going to do.
Especially nowadays with a lot of distractions that we have all over us. So I agree. Focus is one of the main traits that will push you forward. Now, moving on to your specific business that you're running today, something else that impressed me that I want to touch on is the emotion that you focus on when you're working on your projects. Now, in video and in more most of the creative aspects of this industry, and especially in marketing, whether you're creating content as images, as video, as text, calculating the emotion is very difficult. You cannot x plus y equals z and derive the emotion. So let me and the audience know, how do you exactly approach it, and how do you take what the clients need and then turn it into a product that they will enjoy, that they will share freely with their audience, and just create something that they like.
Yeah. So to take that back a step, to then go up a
Okay.
step, why do we need to look at emotions in the first place? And the reason for that is because over the past 10, 15, 20 years to a lesser degree, we've been bombarded as consumers with tons and tons of advertisements, whether it be on TV, in the papers, streaming services, or on social media. Advertisements are everywhere,
Everywhere.
everywhere. And Lico, do you want to take a guess on average how many advertisements we see every day?
Oof. I will boldly say at least 100.
Definitely, that's in the ballpark. So the average, it's a very broad average, but it's 50 to
Yeah.
400 per day. But
This
it's
includes
just
scrolling through social media, opening emails, looking at your favorite series, right?
correct, the whole lot. And what surprised me the first time when I saw that number, I'm thinking to myself, but I don't even compute that I've seen that many advertisements
Yeah.
every day, because that's
Yep.
where we're at as consumers. We see an advertisement, we don't even recognize it anymore, and it just goes past us. So from a business's perspective, that's not very effective, because I have a message that I want to share as a business. The customer isn't receptive to hearing that anymore because they're sick and tired of hearing advertisements. So then how do you communicate that message to the customers? And so this is where emotion comes in. And this is why I heavily focus all of our work, that what we do at Fixed On Media, with emotion. In that, if you can craft a story, and we talk about storytelling with your show here, if you can craft a story that is relatable, it's emotively captivating, and beneath all of that, there is a message that is subtly and subconsciously communicated to the audience, then they're just engrossed in what they're watching. They're engrossed in the plot, they're engrossed in the storyline. And then the emotions that they have from watching that film are then brought to themselves. And beneath all of that, without them even realizing, their subconscious brain has picked up a message that the business wants them to know about. And they don't think about it straight away. It sits in there. Yeah, it sits in
Yep.
there. As I said with the editing of that video earlier, maybe it just sat with me for years. And then at the right moment, that message will pop out and you'll say, oh, and your brain will tick through. It'll tick through and say, where did we find that message from? And it'll go back to that brand that you saw the video from.
This is I love it. I love how you put it because this is very similar to something that one of my previous guests mentioned, Barry Labov. He is a well-known marketer with a lot of experience, but he put it in this way: when he reviews a campaign that his team has done, and it feels almost like a song that he loves, for 2 3 minutes he just disappears from the physical world. He is involved in this specific project or song or emotion, and for 2 3 minutes you're like floating somewhere in the metaverse or whatever. So this sounds pretty much similar like this. You create an emotion, you create a video that will take us away from our daily lives for 2 3 10 minutes, however long you manage to do it.
Definitely. And it is very much about pulling them away just for that time being and captivating them for that short period of time. And to do that, you need to be in a relatable situation. You need to create something that is
Yeah.
emotively captivating, because with an attention span of 8 seconds for a human being these days, which is it's less than a goldfish, just
Yep.
that's pretty poor. How do you captivate someone so quickly that you're going to be able to hold them there for an extended period of time? And so if you don't have something that pops out to be relatable straight away, that gives a little bit of a sense of deja vu, perhaps, then
Yeah.
you've got no chance of keeping them on board, and you lose them straight away.
All right, and walk me behind the scenes. So I am one of your potential customers. I come to you with the problem that I have. How do you approach the work with the client, and how do you approach your final product?
So we've created what I like to call the brand film framework. And
Okay.
what that involves is it's a 4 step process, 4 pillars of a brand film is what I like to say. So, first and foremost, the first question is, as a business, what is it that you truly sell? What is the real product or service? The deeper that we can go with this answer, the better. So, I'll give you one example. I was looking at a film that Apple did recently, and I've done an article about it. I think it's going live this morning on LinkedIn. And what is it that Apple really sell? They don't just sell modern pieces of technology, phones and
Yeah.
tablets and so forth. That's very much on the surface level. It's the correct answer, but we want to go much deeper and find a spot that we can connect with people on. So the true product and service of Apple is the creation of technology that can enhance the quality of life of the individual, whether it be in a professional capacity or in a personal capacity. That's their true product or service. And you can see there, Nico, just how much deeper that we've gone from that one response and
Yep.
how much we can pull out of that now.
And that's the first step of
That that's
digging into the product.
that's the first step, correct? So then
Perfect.
from there, the second question, the second pillar is, what is the impact of your business in terms of that product or service? And there's going to be many different impacts. So one of the ways we can look at it from Apple is they've got many different product offerings. They've got the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, etc. And one of the examples that we'll focus on for the sake of the example today is the second version of their AirPods. So
Okay.
you've got a similar product in your ears at the moment. What's an impact of those headphones, the AirPods? And they have this feature on the second version, which is a hearing aid feature. So you can open up
Mm.
your phone and you switch on that, and it acts as a hearing aid for people with hearing loss. Incredible piece of technology. So what's the impact of that feature? The impact of that is allowing people with hearing loss to be able to experience the sensation of being able to hear once again. An incredibly profound impact. So that's the second
Yep.
box. So now we've ticked off the first two. From there, the third part is bringing in the emotions. So what are the associated emotions of the impact? And we have to remember here, we're only focusing on one singular impact. You can create multiple different films for different impacts and have a little series, which many of the big brands do. But for one video, you want one impact, one message, and just keep it nice and easy to understand. So in terms of the emotions, there's two lots of emotions that we're wanting to find out for. What are the emotions that an individual is feeling before they experience the impact? So in this case, how does a person with hearing loss feel but not being able to hear? And then afterwards, once they experience that impact of wearing the AirPods and being able to hear again, what are the emotions that they're feeling then? And what that does, by having those two contrasting emotions, typically the before, sadness, guilt, anger, frustration, those really darker emotions. And then the after is, of course, the opposite: happiness, joy, gratitude, satisfaction, whatever it may be. Being able to grab both of those ends of the spectrum is enabling you to build a story. Because if you think of the traditional storyline structure, you think of the Cinderella story, it starts off down here, very upset, and then it goes up a little bit. She meets the prince, and then loses the shoe, and then he's got to go find her, and then it's coming up, and then the happiness peaks again. So if you can find the emotions that are felt before, and you can find them after at its peak, that enables you to tell that story. Does that make a
It
little bit
kind
of
of sounds
sense?
like definitely. It's what I imagine is being taking the reader, the listener, the viewer onto a roller coaster of emotions.
Correct. Spot on.
Right?
And the more precise that you can be as a business, or in our
Yeah.
case, the more precise that we can be as a production company to find those emotions, the better a story that we can tell, the better we can captivate the audience, and the more effective we are going to be in telling the business's message to their customers. And then finally,
And also something before you
First
go on
words.
with the last step, just to highlight for the listeners as well, it's important to focus on one trait and one impact only per video, per campaign, per whatever you're doing, but simplify it by focusing on one thing only, correct?
Correct, yeah. It's focusing on one, very, very important, just for the clarity of message. What
Yep.
a lot of brands tend to do that don't have the full experience is they think about, we've got this that we want to talk about, we've got this that we want to talk about, and we've also got this that we want
Yes.
to talk about. But if you start mixing more than one together, all you're doing is diluting your message. So you want to make it as clear as possible. As we touched on, there's already an issue with businesses being able to communicate to their customers. Customers are not receiving that message. So you want to make it as simple as possible to be able to communicate that message.
Great.
Yeah,
And the fourth step, before I cut you off.
that's all right. So the fourth step is very, very straightforward, and it's just bringing in your core values and your core beliefs as a business. So what is it that you believe in? What is unique to your business that you believe in? So for someone like an Apple, if you go to their website, you'll see that their core values is all about empowering the people, making us more connected than ever before, and, doing it in that area. It goes back to that quality of life side of things, empower the individual to be the best that they can be. So with all those four questions answered, now you can look to create a relatable storyline out of that. And you're focusing here on the impact and then those emotions that are associated with it. So what Apple have done, I'll use the real world example of this, is at Christmas time they created a short film, 2 minutes in length, and it was a father and her daughter and the mother as well. The daughter was opening up her Christmas present, would have been a teenager, and she gets given a guitar because she plays the guitar. And she's very, very happy. So you bring that joy in and all of that. But then they show the camera to the father, and he's got the hearing issue. And you can see that he's very happy that he's been able to gift his daughter with this gift. But you can see that he's very frustrated and upset that as she starts playing the guitar, he can't hear it properly. So he starts to have flashbacks of when she was a little girl, and he gifted her first little guitar, would have been a little ukulele, and they go through all these old memories, and they keep cutting the camera back to him, and seeing that he's getting more and more upset. He starts having tears come down his eyes. And again, you've got all those emotions coming through, telling the story. And then the mum comes over, gives him the AirPods, puts them in his ear, opens up his phone, turns on the hearing aid feature, and then through the editing, they make the audio of his hearing come up so much more clearly, and you can start to hear the song the girl's playing and when she's singing, and you can see a little bit of joy come into his face and the happiness, and it completely transforms everything. But you can see through that storyline
Yeah.
just in my description there, and I encourage your listeners and your viewers to go and find it. Just search up Apple Christmas Film on YouTube. You can see and hear through that demonstration just how the storyline changes and the emotions change throughout, and how they've brought in what their true parental services, which is empowering the quality of life of the individual. Well, we've just seen his hearing improve. That's an increased quality of life. Then we've touched on that one specific impact of the hearing aid feature and what it can do for the individual. And then we've seen the emotions come through. And then beneath all that, they haven't gone out public and said, this is what we believe in. They've just subtly left that in there through the storyline to say, hey, we do believe in connecting us more than ever before. We do believe in empowering the individual. That's a great film. Really, really good.
But and there's the smart thing to do by not stating it after the campaign or after the ad, but letting the ad speak for itself. If you've done it properly, and as in your example, they did it, you, they don't need to state it after this. And the other thing that your example reminded me of is that we as marketers, as content creators, as experts, we don't need to overcomplicate the campaigns and the ideas. We need to look just for something that's relevant, that's relatable in our daily lives, and try to recreate it and use it to connect with the people that we want to connect with at the end of the day.
100%. Yeah.
Um,
Relatability, so important. And it just doesn't have to be anything crazy. As you touched on there, the most simple situations that we can find relevant are going to be effective, because we all, as individuals, we may not suffer from hearing loss. So we may not be in that position, but we can still relate to it in knowing
yeah,
what it would be like to not be able to hear. Yeah, we can understand how that would make us feel if we couldn't hear. So yeah,
of
very,
course.
very simple, very relatable. It's going to be captivating for the audience.
Nice reminder to just look for real life examples that we can use. Did there something else that I want to transition to now? We brought up storytelling. You mentioned how you create those stories and how you drive through those emotions. But tell me, what is one specific story, either a fictional story that you love or a story from your life that has happened, that keeps you pushing forward, that when you're feeling down and you need some inspiration, you go to that story and you charge yourself up?
Very, very good question, Nico. Very good question. A story that I go to.
Again, it could be fictional,
Mm.
might be a movie, might be something from a song, for example.
A mix of fictional and non-fictional for you. So around about October, November of last year, maybe a little bit earlier, I was feeling quite fatigued, quite tired.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I've just got to go lie down for a little bit, because I know, generally speaking, if I lie down for half a day, the next day I'm fine again and I'm good to go for the next week, 2 weeks. So I went and laid down, put on the TV and scrolled through to find a movie to watch. And I found a movie. It was called About Time. And the movie, what the basic plot is that the main character, the man in the story, he turns 18 or 21, one or the other, and at that age in his family, all of the men or the males find this ability to time travel. And so the father sits down with him and says, "This is the skill that you've got," and he starts using it. And to cut a long story short, he eventually finds a woman that he wants to be with for the rest of his life. And he uses this ability to make sure every interaction is perfect, and it goes forward like that. I thought it was a very good movie. But the reason I bring this up is because as I'm lying there and I'm very tired, I'm watching this, and in the weeks and the months, possibly the years leading up to that, I had always been thinking to myself, go, what is my why for what I do in my life?
Yeah.
You know, what is the reason? And people had spoken about it around, saying this is my why and what forth. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to rush into this. You know, I don't want to rush into finding out what that is, because if I rush into it, it's probably not going to be the correct why. So I let it sit there for a little bit. And as I'm watching this movie, it just came to me, and I thought to myself, you know, my why is to create happiness for all the people around me. Doesn't matter what the situation is. One example for how that relates to the real world, one of the clients that we work with is a major sporting organization. I know that by filming all of their athletes, I'm able to give them happiness because I let them show off the amazing hard work that they're putting in to be the best that they can be. And as an individual that played sport, I can relate to the position that they're in. So I know that brings them happiness. But equally, if I have a client and we're able to give them big success on a campaign through one of our films, that brings them incredible happiness. And so to answer your question, what where do I go back to keep pushing me forward, to propel me forward when I need that little bit of a push? I do think back to that moment, and whether or not that be a story per se, more so the moment that came with watching this film, I go back to that and say, this is what I'm doing it for. This is the reason why behind what I do, and that does come
Yeah.
forward. It's only been, as I said, maybe 4 or 5 months, whatever it's been since that moment occurred, but since then, it has very much been a case of when things are a little bit tough or I'm a little bit tired, whatever it may be, I think back to that, and okay, that is the reason why this is happening.
Nice, and I love that it's connected with your why, because it is our north star for people. Like, if you want to chase your goals, you want to be ambitious at some point, it is definitely not the material things that attract us to propel forward. This is not the fuel. We with most people probably have tried it. It might last 3 4 years for the materialistic things to be your goal, but at the end, yeah, you can drive a faster car. Yeah, you can live in a bigger apartment and so forth and so forth. But that is not the why and the purpose that you're after. So I love the fact that you're connecting it with a why. And it just as a reminder that those purposes, those whys can grow and can evolve as we evolve and we go through our lives. So thanks, Didier, for mentioning it in this way and connecting it with your story. And before I let you go, one last question. Was there something that I didn't manage to ask you, or something very important that you want to share with me and the audience?
I think we've done a great job in being very uh,
For
comprehensive
sure.
in going around every topic of discussion. I think for listeners and for viewers, the biggest takeaway that I would like them to have to apply to whatever position of life that they're in currently is look back on where you've come from. Doesn't matter where those beginnings are, in what field or what position you've been in previously, and just find what are those traits, what are those character traits that you've picked up along the way that have been instrumental to getting you from point A to point B, and where you
Mm.
could use those to get you from where you are right now to where you want to be in future. As we touched on with my journey, through the sport, I was able to pick up discipline and hard work and etc. And now that I'm in my business life, I take those traits that made me who I was at that time frame and got me to where I wanted to be at that point in time, and brought that into the world of business, because I know that if I've had those previously and I was a good version of myself using them, that I can use them again to propel me to where I want to go in the future.
Great way to end the episode, and I do believe in this, that everything happens for a reason. No matter how religious you are, everything happens for a reason. You might not know what the reason is, you might not even realize at a certain age, but if you look back and think, oh yeah, discipline, I trained to be a goalkeeper, and now it helps me to actually communicate with my team better. This makes a lot of sense.
There,
So dear,
yeah, just one more
yep,
thing on that, Nico, before we finish up. There's that great quote from Steve Jobs where he says, "You can't
yeah,
connect the dots looking forward; you can only connect them looking back." So you have to hope it and
yes,
know that you're going to be able to connect the dots as you move forward. And I think that's a great thing to think about. Is you'll never be able to
yep,
do it moving forward, but you have to trust that you're taking the best steps with the amount of information that you have to make a decision on a daily basis. You're making those correct decisions that when you get 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line, you can look back and say, hey, that connected with this and that was this. And
yes.
yeah, I think that's a great quote to live by. So yeah, thank you, Nico. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Didier. It was a great way to end my day, and I hope it was a very pleasant way to start your day. And thanks a lot for the time and the conversation.
Pleasure.
See you.
Thanks, Nico.